You recording? Okay. I think we're at 6 o'clock, so whenever you're ready.
Welcome to the August 11th meeting of Kent County Comprehensive Rezoning and Zoning Task Force meeting. I'll take a roll call first. Howard Nickerson here. Bill Nora here. Bill Sutton here. Ryan Greenwood here. Buck Nickerson here. Chicky Delwani
Here.
Cindy Genther. Cindy Genther. James Saunders. James Saunders. He's not with us, always highway owner. Yeah. Or he is, not going to be with us tonight. Sam Shogay. Sam Shogay. Mel Basin. I'm Tyler. First item is we'll ask for a review and discussion on the any comments, edits to the task force minutes of Wednesday, July 28th. So we've had time to review those. Please offer any edits. Right? Go ahead. Okay.
I have a question about page 7. When we were discussing the hearing lengths, it states here that the staff was going to listen to the recording and try to reach some sort of consensus. And when they reviewed the meeting, there were more members that supported flexibility to the regulations. And members who preferred to keep the 150-foot maximum in place. I'm not sure what flexibility to the regulations means because there was a whole lot of discussion and lots of different suggestions. But I also want to know, how did you determine the consensus when in the reviewing what you put in here as what was said, it looked like only 6 members spoke up, but there were 13 on at the meeting, in person or online. So 7 didn't say anything, so how can you say a majority was in favor of this? A majority of people spoke, yes. Maybe not a majority of people. Which leads me to my main question. I do not understand the process that we are following. Because when it's been implied now that the summaries of the meetings are basically our recommendations. And if they are our recommendations, we never voted on them. And I don't understand how you can have 6 people have a discussion. That becomes the consensus of the group of 14 or 16, however many there are.
And
And then you put that on to either the county commissioners, the planning and zoning, wherever it goes to the next step. And I do know we are having a meeting, public hearing in October for the public to review our recommendation. We haven't said anything in here, we are recommending blah, 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 because flexibility to regulations about the piers certainly isn't a recommendation. So I'm very concerned about what we're doing.
And it's
And it's not, this just brought to my attention when I was reading the summary. And I would like some kind of explanation as to how this is construed to be a recommendation, or is it not a recommendation? My question.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that feedback, and perhaps it should have said more members spoke in support of flexibility. That might clarify the sort of the point being made. But in the larger process, the goal of this group is to be ideas focused and to work towards a consensus. Yeah, the idea of this group is to be idea focused and to work towards consensus if possible. So what I'm trying to do in that sentence is inserted in the minutes by me. I'm trying to personally insert these summary pieces at the end, is to try to reflect what I heard in the meeting, whether it's partial or full or either incomplete, so that we know just what was expressed. And I agree, it should say spoken support. And the purpose of doing it in minutes is specifically so that this body can look at those minutes and agree or disagree and make comments, and we can work on revised language if desired.
So my question then is, we're going to go look at all these things all over again.
Well, hopefully we're only going to look at the summary of what.
What does that mean? At some point, we have to have 14 or 16 people vote and say, yeah, this is what we recommend.
So before we get to that second public hearing, I plan on presenting to you a summary document that lists these pieces out of each item. So it's just a page with, here was the topic, here was that summary sentence or two, and that document is something that you'll review and be able to comment on and vote on. So, and like I said, at this point in the process, we're not doing roll call votes. We're trying to sort of discern what the overall expression was. In some cases, it's going to be the task force did not come to a consensus. But the idea is that this group is a diverse group, many hats, the person has many hats, and the Board of County Commissioners is looking for more input on this process and on these pieces. So in some cases, the task force isn't going to speak with one voice, and that'll be reflected. So that's the process as we're moving.
Okay.
And let me clarify this. We talked about the minutes having some force of recommendation. That would only be if we can easily discern it's a consensus. Correct. Right. And the idea is to reflect what happens. So sometimes we'll have a consensus, sometimes. Thank you. Go ahead.
I think what is a correction in the minutes, we're on page 6 of 9, halfway down. It says a member suggests the language 200 feet. By line, county to review an application on a case-by-case basis, so long as the request does not be on the town. The town should be town.
Thank you.
That's my correction.
Thank you. You may have the same one I do.
Okay. So there was actually 2 things on this I found, and it wasn't so much that minutes misquoted. It was that this information given, and I'd like to clarify that this information, because I know there's a lot of facts in here, especially if we go back, we double back to this in a couple of months, we're going to have to reread this. One of the main things I'm concerned about is it's quoted in here that Riverkeeper was concerned about dredging does disturb this activity when it comes to building piers. And that is a misstatement. She actually said that. But that is not correct. When peer permits are issued, it clearly says in the state license, the federal license, that dredging cannot occur. And I've got license right here, I can prove if anybody wants to see it. So that was one that, when somebody who doesn't know anything about peers reads this, they'll say, oh, geez, now that's what the big machine is, it's like dredging. Well, that's not true. It's happened with driving pilings in the ground, but no dredging or digging is taking place. So I would like dredging struck minutes if at all possible. Also,
question for that, I haven't listened to you take, did it say dredging?
She said dredging, without that. I'm
Well, I don't know that we can take it out, you said it, I think you can make a motion that you want to amend your statement to that.
Okay.
Because I don't know, maybe we can restate that.
And also, Ms. Lewis about rather than observing construction by surprise, Ms. Lewis went on to say that there was neighbor notifications that were given for peer process, and she's 100% right about that, but never made it 10 minutes. When we submit an application for a peer permit, we're required to not only send letters to the neighbors, but they have to be by certified mail, and the sender has to fill out a certification to the state that guarantees that they did that. We also have to notify the county officials as well. That's all part of the process. So and with Ms. Lewis's first statement, I think it needs to continue her quote to say that she recognized that neighbor notifications are given. So the only people who get a construction of a pier by surprise are ones who have a neighbor who's building an illegal pier or doesn't make the mail.
Well, those corrections, I think, can be made when we do the last, and get this clarified, and if anyone, that Andy or Ms. Lewis were here, they can offer to clarify that to you. I had the same thing, but, and look, this was just confusing me, and I think you were the one who made the statement, why I mentioned it on page 7, paragraph being L.R. Collier statement. It says the second member responded that riparian rights of the owner have to establish some limits. And that's a question. I don't know, as I remember it, I don't think that's not what I heard, but yes, I'd like to clarify that too when we go back. Maybe you can clarify that when we review.
And I think that's kind of a paraphrase. But no,
Well, when we get to the review of business, I'd like a clarification if that's
sure. And I don't mean to talk, I'm trying to catch the microphone when I'm talking, so if I talk loud, I'm yelling, I'm just trying to, because that's one of the reasons I'm here. Last meeting, I could barely hear it, and at the planning commission last week or so, I couldn't hear it all. So.
I realized it was bad. I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
For anyone else.
Any other further amendments for
discussion, corrections to the last meeting's minutes?
So I'll
have a motion, I can take a motion.
Mr. Hickman, has it been clarified what is going to change in the minutes before you take a motion to amend them?
I think
what I suggested, and please correct me, council, if I'm wrong, is that what was said in the minutes was said by anyone. That was said. That's the minutes. We have old business. We can ask for all those items that were discussed. We can ask for clarification from those members, or have some testimony from anyone about, as the people here have stated, Ryan Beller, Bill.
Joe, this is Carla. Were we going to make 2 corrections though? One to page 6 was that channel instead of town.
That's fine.
And I think on page 7, insert spoke, more members spoke in support of flexibility.
Yeah. So I ask for a motion to approve based on those 2 corrections. Probably just mentioned. Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you for that. Just a quick review, as we stated before, open free discussion, we hear from everyone in the public on the screening walls, and certainly all the members of the task force and staff. Please direct your questions through the chair. And everyone might have anyone do interrupt and don't debate among yourselves. Be conscious of speaking on the mics, and wave or yell at someone's mouth, because the public deserves that. So let's get started. Let's go back to this business. We have 4 items we discussed, and if there's any, let's start with the critical area standards or any further questions, items that will be reviewed there. Hearing none, how about our buffers and the RCD campgrounds? Now see your view of the elimination of the maximum care rate. We have some questions here, and I'll start with Buck. You had item 2.
Sure. And I have evidence here to prove what I was saying. As I spoke earlier, the river keeper mentioned dredging during the construction here. And that is not true. I have a license right here that was issued by the MDE for a pier, just a standard straight pier, on July 30th. And right in the second page of the license, it says this license proposes no dredging, and this license provides no justification or assurance future dredging. All dredging projects will be evaluated on the biological and physical characteristics of the site at the time an application is made. That's the site license. When you get a pier, you also get a federal license. And that's 24 pages, and basically the same language in the federal license. Again, this is for piers are category A's, and category A right here highlights this activity is not authorized filling dredging, doesn't authorize propeller dredging, not dredging. And any future request dredging navigational access would be similar authorized. Need to be similarly authorized as here. So that's my proof that there's no dredging that takes place during pier construction.
Thank you, gentlemen. I don't know if anyone in the public, and particularly if anyone from the River Association is listening in and want to comment on that. Okay, if not, we'll move on. Can you talk about the riparian rights from what you intended to say there, or what I didn't understand?
So when you buy a waterfront property, there are certain riparian rights that come along with, it's kind of common law, they come along with a waterfront piece of property, access to the water. The side riparian right lines are basically where the property lines cross land, touch the mean-high water line. So that's your property ends where the average high tide comes every day. But you have certain rights out in the water. And that line, sides are defined by equitable line between two property owners. And there's several different scenarios that come up. It may be, everybody wants access to navigable water, so they may pull a line perpendicular to the channel. If it's a straight shoreline, you may turn 90 degrees and split the angle, but the bottom line is the side riparian lines are always an equitable line. That's waters of the United States, everybody has an equal shape to it. As far out as you go, depends on a lot of different things as far as channel. Usually, on the channel side, you don't have riparian rights all the way to the other side of the waterway. So it's usually limited to the channel, the navigable channel of the waterway. That's the area that you have certain rights to construct your pier, moor a boat, things like that.
But it doesn't impact your desired pier length. It may impact your desired pier length, but it doesn't impact the fact you can still have a pier. It's based on your riparian rights you can have if you're allowed by right.
The only thing that would riparian rights, sometimes you get like a code situation where the riparian rights converge together really fast, and it may limit to a 50-foot pier. Or less, so you could have a 6-foot wide pier. Not only you have the riparian right lines, but you also have to meet the side yard setbacks of that zone. Like if you're in the critical area residential zone, you have to stay 15 feet off of your riparian right lines. You have a lot like a Greg Neck. where the lot's only 50 foot wide, for example, well, you only have a 20-foot space to build that pier. And I can think of an example up at the end of Spring Cove Road. Mr. Joe Thayer was in a hollow, and the cove in his lines converged, and he could only go out like 50 feet.
So in general, preparing rights, you're not going to allow any further, it's more restrictive, more based on your law. So that's what I thought, I was wondering if you did so. Thank you. Any other items for discussion on our whole business and moving that? We had also discussed tree board and floodplain. Okay, if not, let's move on to new business. P1 request to change farm definitions for shed to be built without a dwelling. Bill, thank you. On this matter, the land use ordinance does not contain any provisions that would allow the construction of a shed on a property without a dwelling. Sheds may be constructed 6 months prior in anticipation of a primary dwelling, but for properties where a primary structure is not anticipated, there are no provisions. The request is related to a property that's zoned AZP and is less than 20 acres and thus cannot meet the definition of a farm. This sort of revolves around 2 issues: the definition of a farm, which in our code is a parcel of land not less than 20 acres in size, used for agriculture as defined within the ordinance. Then for non-farm properties, so properties that can't meet that definition, a principal structure must be provided on the land before an accessory structure. And that relates back to the definition of an accessory structure, which is an attached structure on the same parcel as the principal structure or use, and which is incidental and subordinate to the principal structure or use in area, extent, and purpose, i.e. shed, detached garage. So without that principal structure, you can't have an accessory structure. So in the case of the member of the public was asking about a way of changing things, so a shed can be built without a dwelling. But farm, in the case of it is a non-farm. In cases of where there is a farm, the farm itself becomes the principal use, and that's what allows an accessory shed on those properties of 20 acres or more. So in order for the requester to erect an accessory building on a property less than 20 acres, the definition of a farm must be altered, or the definition of accessory structure must be altered, or potentially both. The 2018 comprehensive plan differentiates between farms and non-farms specifically. Now, page 41 of the comp plan reports that under the county's land use ordinance, a parcel over 20 acres is considered a farm. For the purposes of the priority preservation area, parcels under 20 acres are considered developed and not farms. So there's approximately 6,630 acres within the PPA that are subdivided into parcels under 20 acres, and about 140,000 acres are considered undeveloped. That's how the comp plan characterizes what's in the land use ordinance. And the comp plan also suggests that property owners voluntarily merge their smaller parcels with larger farms in order to eliminate small parcels in the ACP. On page 48, the comp plan states that in order to achieve the goal of maintaining the rural and agricultural character of the county, the number of existing scattered undeveloped lots located in the agricultural and resource conservation areas must be reduced. The county will pursue lot consolidation methods for landowners to voluntarily incorporate these parcels into the main farm parcels. It's my understanding that that language is intended to talk with folks who are owners of both the large farm and the small parcels. So consolidation amongst within the holdings of a single property owner. The requester owns one of the parcels for which the comp plan suggests a merger as a solution. However, in this case, the requester's property is surrounded by roads and bordered by village zoning. There is no larger parcel to be incorporated into. So, again, this is a request from the member of the public being changed the code for a very specific issue. Staff recommends that the task force consider adding a new special exception whereby non-farms with unique circumstances such as weather conditions, topography, or access issues may apply for accessory farm buildings in the ACD district. Thank you. Any members of the task force have questions or comments from Bill, or comments in general?
Yeah, Joe. I might suggest that I know that tax-wise and tax assessment-wise, I don't know if this has much to do with rezoning and, but it is, your land, if it's, you're using it as agricultural use, 5 acres, I believe, minimum. If you're using that, tilling it or have animals on it or whatever it might be in ag use, that allows you to get ag assessment on your land, which is something that a lot of people strive to do because it's cheaper. So I would think that that's one set of standards that is set. What, it would be easier if we had one set of standards for a lot of things here. So I don't know that 5 acres constitutes a farm, but I think that should, one should mesh with the other one there, in my mind.
The only comment I have there, I mean, for the ag use, 5 acres is state law. And I don't, in my opinion, for this type of proposal, however we handle, I like special exception, I think it's a better way than changing farm definition in our ordinance at this point, because that opens up so many things. Because we go 5 acres on farms, and let's start over, start over, because it changes uses, activities, everything. I can understand people get an ag use and people do that, they get forestry use, but I personally, I'd like to see a definition of farming changed at this point.
He may say what I would
You
say.
can just yell at me, you're right here. Right.
No, the only question I have there, when we're talking about a house being built on it, I just say a person, whether it's 5 acres or 10 acres or 13 acres, they might want to have a couple of greenhouses, have roadside stands, sell flowers, produce, and they can do it on that 13 acres, and they might live 5 miles away, which I don't see what's wrong with that. There may not be land joining them that they could buy or sell, and then if they could, it might take all the capital to where they couldn't do their agricultural enterprise. So I think we have to recognize that agriculture is changing from maybe what we thought of it, 50 years ago or even 20 years ago. And there's a lot of people, I say a lot of people, there's people that want to have a small face and try to make that work for them. And I don't know if we should, deny that.
Well, do you think a special exception would handle that?
It could. I mean, I'm assuming the planning and zoning administrator would be given a special exception for planning and zoning. Or where
That's a different discussion, I think, how it's handled, whether it's administrative, but I guess the idea of special exception is, you say greenhouses, you look at farming plant farms. I'm not sure, they're not an AZD, I'm pretty sure, but that's a community commercial. But if that's very small acreage. And if you had a house, just a residential house, in the AZD, but in a residential use, you wouldn't want to see that use there with that by right. I'm not picking on the business, I'm just saying it's not compatible with residential, in my opinion.
Right. Well, I would say, you can look at a lot of those, I asked, Brian Williams, Red Acre Farms, if they didn't already have a farm, they have a farm there, he wouldn't want 165 acres to do what he's doing at that. And that's where you should have an opportunity for someone else wanted to do that, and still, we've got to be open to that. And sometimes when we have special exceptions, I mean, people look at it, see what they can do in an area, in a county, and if it starts becoming so restrictive, they don't even try. They don't know if they're going to go, they're going to grant that. So if we had where, okay, yeah, you can have a different type of farm business on small acreage, then they know they can proceed. Without having to go through a lot of, maybe I'll get it, maybe I won't get it, that type of thing.
Go ahead.
Well, the issue in this context is, will this person be able to put a shed on this building, not a house? It already is in ag use. So that's not the issue either. The issue is can he build a shed without having a house first? Because it doesn't meet the definition of a farm because it's not 20 acres. So that's the question we're facing here. And I would agree with the recommendation of the staff, because I think it should be a special exception to do things on the property, yeah. Because it's not normally allowed currently, and I'm afraid if you start opening up a can of worms, this one, and the exception to that, this and that, and make it all by right, we're gonna run into trouble. I think we're better off making it one step, asking for a special exception, having a hearing, which would be involved. And then if they meet all the parameters that's required by the county zoning, then we will be granted that. But at least the neighbors are told what's going on, and I am totally against changing the definition of farm. I think it has to remain at 20 acres more. You start getting down to 5 acre farms, they're not really farms. They're small parcels that one farms, and you're allowing certain uses that you're trying to keep out of the neighborhoods or close in the neighborhoods when you have 5 acre parcels. If you call a farm, and that grants them a lot of other things that they can do. So I think to answer this particular situation here, that we should let it be not continue, but create a special exception. They want to put an accessory building on an ACD parcel that doesn't have a house existing.
Thank you.
I absolutely agree with Ms. Patrick, that's what the definition of a farm. I am totally for the special exception, but I'd like to see special exceptions. If the Board of Appeals is going to approve it, I'd like to see it go straight to the Board of Appeals, not go through the planning commission this month, get a favorable or unfavorable recommendation, and then wait a month to go to the Board of Appeals. Just stretches everything out, especially if it is a legitimate farming operation. It's probably February, and they're thinking about trying to get a crop in March or April, and now we've got 3 months of deadlines to get through, and then you have a 30-day waiting period after that. Something else was, could we come up with a definition of a farm building? It's not a shed or an accessory building, you have a farm building that meets certain parameters. Whether it's storage of animals, storage of equipment, not, where all of a sudden they're running a mechanic shop out of a home building that's on 18 acres or something. Just a thought.
Yeah. One thing, Buck, and I appreciate everyone concerned about business moving along, but the troubles being when people, whether they have 5 acres and will start greenhouse intensive operation, hydroponics, I hope they're not making decisions, they got to do something in 30 days.
Yeah.
Farmers don't do that. Yeah. And that's the same with a lot of issues. Process goes on. I'm not saying we should slow it down, but I think it deserves its due.
From my experience in Kent, Queen Anne's, Cecil counties, and other counties is that landowners or potential landowners go to planning and zoning, and like I said, this is across the board, and I think they've all heard it out of me, and they said, oh, it's no problem, yeah, we can get you this, and they think, oh, this is a month process, all I've got to do is fill out a form, and I'm going to get a permit, and then you go with your application, and it's a 6-month process. So I've seen it a lot. I mean, my building, to put my business on my property took me 6 months. By the time I did the survey and prepared the plans, started getting the ball rolling, and I did all that myself. So that's, like I say, I'd like to see some of those processes kind of condensed.
I'd like to clarify one thing. I was not in my analysis there stating that I thought that the definition of farm should be changed to 5 acres. So just
Anyone else, any other task force members online. I can't read this. You can go ahead. Hearing none, how about, does anyone in the public that's online or streaming have any comments for the task force? Hearing none, anyone in the public have a comment? Please come forward, take your name,
Jenny Richardson Lewis. Actually, I just have a question. The request is to build a shed, not a greenhouse, as I see it. Is that correct? That you were trying to make some,
I mean,
it doesn't say a barn building, it's requesting they can build a shed. And sheds have definitions in the county, is that correct?
it will be an accessory structure.
So an accessory structure, does accessory structure include greenhouses and stables or animal facilities?
Those will be separate.
I'm sorry.
Those are separate. They're not.
So what we're talking about here is a shed. We're not talking about greenhouses and other things. Am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else in the public want to comment?
Mr. Hickman, this is Chicky Sijwani.
Go ahead, Ricky.
Just wanted to make sure. I think Ms. Pat's spot on with just having special exceptions to some regard, but I agree with Buck. I think we really need to look at that. I understand, yes, that things take a month for the permit, but I don't think anything that we've ever done, it's took a month. Everything's always been 6 months, and that's not anybody's fault per se, but there's always things that are going on that come up as you're putting your permit in. And that's the biggest reason why, like, I want to be here to help streamline that process for whoever it is. And I think that's something that Buck just said needs to be looked at thoroughly, in my opinion. The zoning thing and all, we're all in agreement with, but once that's clarified, we need to really revisit that, what Buck just brought up.
Thank you. And anyone else online? And I've got someone in the audience, you got to step forward.
Just tying into,
Wait, that mic doesn't work, but you really got to speak to it.
okay. Tying into Janet's question, I have a question. In the notes from the planning commission, it says that accessory farm buildings include barns, cribs, stables, sheds, tool rooms, shops, bins, and silos. Well, that's a pretty broad definition. And could incorporate a whole lot of different uses. Would apply a lot of different uses. And I think a little more thought ought to be given to the extent to which your special exception can be applied in terms of the type of accessory building. Because keeping of animals, for example, in a barn creates a whole different set of circumstances than a greenhouse or whatever. But I would urge more consideration.
Thank you. Can you give us your name?
Mr. Hickman, may I clarify that the list of uses that Ms. Reader read off are accessory uses permitted on farms, which means that it has to be that 20 acres.
Did you hear that?
All right, so what would they be on non-farms?
Non-farms then has a more restricted list of what is considered an accessory structure. That's going to be your typical shed, your garage. We do make a distinction when we permit or when we review building permits for whether a structure is an ag structure on a farm or a pole building on a non-farm.
I think staff is what I'm hearing here with all the comments is you need to lock down what the definition of a shed is first, making decisions here. Any other comments from anyone? Okay, thank you. Let's move on to P2, request to allow a utility scale energy system in the AZB. Bill, you got something to do? Sir. So before I begin, I just want to say that we received correspondence on this matter late today. One in support of allowing utility scale energy systems, and I believe it was actually from the requestor. So, and then another short email in opposition. I believe I forwarded one to you, and the other one came right at the end of the day, and I'll forward that to you later. It's just a very short email that was opposed to this item. I mean, opposed to allowing utility scale energy systems. So, the request is to allow for utility scale solar energy systems larger than are currently allowed. Now, just note, utility scale wind energy systems are not allowed anywhere in the county. Utility scale wind energy systems were studied and reported on by the Renewable Energy Task Force that determined that utility scale wind energy is neither feasible nor desirable for Kent County. The 2018 comprehensive plan includes the following strategy. Retain the agricultural zoning district. Policy 4, which is obviously one of many, the comp plan prescribes large contiguous areas of prime agricultural land are critical to an expanding and prosperous agricultural industry. The preservation of such areas reduces the potential conflicts between farmers and non-farm neighbors, allows the diversification of agricultural operations, and reduces the need for regulations governing nuisances sometimes associated with agribusiness. It is therefore essential to minimize land consumption by non-farm related development and to target the agricultural zoning district for easement programs and farm retention policies. And further special exception conditions in the land use ordinance, utility scale solar energy systems on farms are limited to 5 acres in ACD, and those solar energy systems that are constructed are considered to be a form of development. And in this case, the language in the land use ordinance appears to be in keeping with the approach and goals of the 2018 comprehensive plan and includes a compromise to allow 5 acres of utility scale solar arrays. Additionally, the priority preservation area as established in Kent County, which includes all the land zone ACD and RCD, as well as any land in a district already protected by easements, that the integrity of that area is in coordination with the comp plan. I will quote again from page 44. As part of the recertification evaluation that is of the priority preservation area, the county is required to maintain policies, ordinances, regulations, and rules that at a minimum do not interfere with normal agricultural and forestry activities and preferably support the ability of working farms to engage in normal agricultural and forestry activities. As a result of these statements and plans, staff recommends that the task force consider maintaining the current regulations that allow up to 5 acres of utility scale solar energy system on farms in the ACG. Thank you. Thank you.
Comments or questions? Bill from the task force.
Bill, I'm thinking back to my time on the renewable energy task force, and I thought that document also put a cap, or at least tied the overall capacity to soil types here in Kent County. Did that make its way into the final document? It can only be built on Class C soils, only up to a certain percentage. Is that reflected for solar panels, for utility scale solar? Is that reflected in the final draft? From the task force.
I don't know. 5 acres certainly was.
Well, I was going to say that you can see the standards for the special exception listed in the staff report. There is no language to that effect, and I am not sure if it made it into the white paper or into any of the other text amendments that were never forwarded and approved.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions from the task force?
I think that until every rooftop, roadway, parking lot is covered in solar panels, that we shouldn't consider taking productive farmland out of production to put solar panels up. I think the population generally gets that electricity is a luxury, not a necessity. And trying to taking a cornfield and putting in solar panels is kind of like taking the refrigerator and kitchen and putting TV in there. It just, to me, just makes no sense.
I agree with you. Thank you for that. Any further comments from the task force? Particularly anyone, I guess Jimmy going online. Anyone online,
This might be too specific, but how many megawatts is 5 acres? I don't think that's a lot. And then that's not utility scale, is it? So why is that in here? If we're talking about utility scale and 5 acres, if we're gonna cap at 5 acres, and 5 acres is only 1 megawatt, that's not utility scale. So, I mean, to Buck's point, I mean, is that even something that we want to remain? It's kind of a misnomer, right? Because we're not actually referring to utility scale, we're only talking about 1 megawatt capacity. So if we really wanted to talk about utility scale solar, then we would have to increase the acreage, therefore increasing the amount of megawatts produced. Because if we're not willing to do that, then calling it utility scale is not accurate.
then, my read, then your solution would be just eliminate utility scale solar from ACD.
Or at least eliminate the actual wording of utility scale. Because it's somewhat misleading.
Anyone else on the task force?
I just want to agree with Buck and
Anyone in the public online, first online, anyone want to comment or have a question? Hearing none, public, and please come forward.
Joe?
Hold on, yes. Who's that?
Hello?
Yes?
Hi, Joe. This is Judy Gifford. Can you hear me? I'm outside. It's almost going to rain here in Kennedyville again.
Oh, good. Go ahead.
I just want to say that it's a false choice. I couldn't hear your discussion because the sound is really bad. But I want to say it's a false choice between saving the planet and covering our farmland with solar panels. And that our ag land is going to become more and more valuable as we see climate change disrupt farming practices around the country. And Kent County, especially, and Delmarva in particular, is going to become the breadbasket of America. If we don't protect it, I think we'll pay a price down the road. So we really have to look at more than one problem to solve with our farmland. Thanks.
Hey.
I think your limitation of 5 acres for energy production may be short-sighted. I understand the value of farmland and preserving it, but we have over 94% of our land in ag right now in this county. And there may come a time when it's desirable to provide for safe energy production, non-polluting energy production, than this draft permits. So you'll be revisiting this, I'm sure, in the future, and you might want to think about it sooner than later. I don't know what the answer is, but we devote very little land to energy production and to other uses in this county. And what we have devoted may be insufficient to support our needs, surrounding communities' needs in the future. So I just say, put your eyes to the future and maybe give yourself a little more flexibility than is currently provided for in this recommendation.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public would like to speak? Yes, sir. Yes, sir, in the back. Are you using the microphone? Yes, please speak up. Yes, state your name and date.
Great. I'm Jim Roseman. I live at 119 High Street, Chestertown. I both pay taxes in Kent County. Grew up on a farm background, corn, soybeans, and livestock, and then no dairy. There's 2 part, Mr. Mason, and Larry salmon. And then I had a career in the Navy where I was, among other duties, involved in propulsion, steam, gas, turbine, and nuclear power. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I must say that as a Kent County resident and taxpayer, I'm opposed to such a change. The agricultural zoning district should be preserved for agriculture. I participated in the public phase of the 2018 comprehensive plan. It reflects clearly public sentiment to retain a rural character of Kent County, consistent with reasonable economic growth in areas zoned specifically for more intense industrial and residential activities, and utility-sized solar fields capable of selling wholesale power are not compatible with the Kent County Comprehensive Plan that was approved. Furthermore, other alternatives to carbon-based energy are available in abundance with safe 24-hour all-weather, reasonably priced proven technologies. You don't have to do this. Solar systems like wind turbines may contribute partially to future needs for electricity, but they need not displace our food-producing landscape. And I appreciate the task force and the commissioners help to keep the county green. And I've submitted these comments by letter.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Anyone else in the public? Yes. Please state your name and realize there's raindrops actually falling on this building. Children born in this county that haven't seen rain.
Great sound. I'm Elizabeth Watson of Chesterton. I just want to reinforce the positive comments by Judy and Mr. Mosman about let's not sacrifice our land for wholesale electricity generation. I completely support whatever is needed for our farmers to employ solar. And that's the purpose of that 5-acre so-called utility scale. And I agree with Mr. Shoge that that's also a misnomer in our language and could be fixed. So that's just, I just want to reinforce what everybody else is saying. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, go ahead.
Jenna Christensen Booth again. I just wanted to remind the task force that the comprehensive plan, as well as what Bill has put forward, Mr. Mackey has put forward, says that farmland is the best and highest use of our land. I think that setting aside land for 5 acres of on-farm use of electricity is what we have and what we should stay with. It would be better if we could actually encourage people to use their barns and their chicken houses and keep it off of the land itself. But knowing that that is not always possible, or that they can't reach the amount of energy that they could use on their farm in those locations, then if we limit it to the 5 acres, that's how we should proceed. And we should, in terms of utility scale, I have to say that utility scale is defined by 1 acre or larger by some of the solar lobby groups. And some define utility scale as 20 acres. So it's not language that needs to be in our zoning necessarily, but it's not wrong either. It depends on who's defining what. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public that can speak? Task force members, any other comments? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Go ahead, state your name, correct.
Alan Davis. I'm an active grain and poultry farmer east of Galena. And just as the only farmer here speaking in regards to, yes, I'm biased toward preserving farmland, but farmland and producing food is a noble use of land too. And it could produce electricity, but if we turn it into solar fields, it's not going back to cropland. And that's not what I think anybody moved to Kent County for, to see fields of solar panels. And as that door is open, we can only go down to Queens County to see where hundreds of acres are being turned into solar fields. And, like I say, if we open that door, that inevitably will be coming along. So I support the staff
Thank you, I appreciate it. Anyone else? Task force members, any comments before we heard? So solar is still permitted in certain, land uses, right? So, maybe our commercial or, employment center, so we're not saying no to solar or even utility scale solar, we're simply saying put solar where it's zoned for.
Correct, yes.
Which is employment center, industry, any other, anything but ag, zones?
No, it is a special exception in a couple of districts. Their age, we have a lot of special exceptions.
And sorry for not double checking prior.
It's a special exception in Crossroads commercial and commercial critical area, and I believe permitted outright in employment center and industrial.
So, I think that's important to state, just because, it's very easy to perceive that, people can be anti-solar or anti-renewable energy. And I think by the decision that we seem to be leaning towards, not permitting it in the ACD, we're both for renewable energy, right? And we understand that it has its role to play in contributing to our overall energy portfolio. I just think we're also weighing the mission statement here, of quite literally saying we value our land. So I just want to make that clear for the record that just because, the consensus, or at least the general discussion of this group is that we don't want to permit utility scale solar in the ACD, doesn't mean that we are anti-solar or anti-renewable energy, so on and so forth.
Thanks, James. Anyone in the public, will allow this task force, will not allow the public to comment and react? Okay, well, thank you all very much. Bill, maybe this is a good time to take 10 minutes. There you go. Take a 10-minute break, so at 7:10 we'll get back and start the next item.
You wanted to go on, just stretch it out.
Looks like we have a few days of rain. At the end of the week. Sunday. Really? So. Let's do it.
I heard it. I've been in here in planning commission meetings.
He gave me like 5 plans, like 8 years ago. And I brought
You get out there.
every year.
It's a sound. Like 10 root.
I'll plant them on 8-foot spacing. I've got 28 plants. I've got, I think, 275 feet of road. I think it's whatever 28 times 8 is. And I've checked. Everybody else I pick my bushels, I pick my buckets. Usually, and I don't know how many quarts you get in out of a bushel. And I knew last year, I don't just Julie's put up.
I was watching.
6 or 7 quarts of look, it takes, I think we get 4 quarts out of a 5-gallon bucket. I know. I picked a hail full the other night. Probably picked maybe a 5-gallon bucket and a half so far this year. And but like what you saw, those are coming, but man, this hot weather kills them.
Yeah. You know what bothers me is I wasn't saying take farms down to 5 acres. I was just correlating that. I mean, because when you got a parcel of land, you might have 12 acres of woods. Huh?
I did.
Oh. Look around at some expressions. That's how you tell. Huh? Yeah. You see a lot more city. A lot more. I mean, even sitting from here and looking that way, looking at it's a big difference. Anytime you just you can see it. I'm sure you can see it. But you know what the problem is so much of it is said. Nobody even knows which can and can't do it.
That's my opinion, with the peers, and that's the one thing that I'm, is that it's a 6-month process. It is a 6-month process to get a peer.
Yes.
Well,
there's certain people that like it. It's called the wear you out survey.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wear you out so you did good. And that's what the Bamers did. Then all of a sudden John's had grandchildren grew up a little bit more and he said, oh, I'm gonna go try again. Come into here. They say no, ag preservation. He called it ag preservation and it was like, we don't have a problem with that. So it's like, what the fuck?
It used to be years ago, I would take on stuff like that. When I get those years, I'm like, you need to hire a person.
Yeah. Well, you wanted to be the earner out. You were not that because they do felt you know. But now you just know where you can do that. I can't do it either. I don't have the time. I mean, it is what it is.
Hey, Buck, I need you to move on here. I work for a pole mill now. I'm like, subdivision, the what? No, I was just in there today. They didn't mention that. They just said, did you come out and move along for me? Like, property behind it, hard to turn. You had to redo your parts. What? It's all part of it. They didn't tell you this. No, they just said you move along. It's a building permit, you know? Todd Meyer, it was the brewery over there, he created the brewery. Todd Meyer calls my 6 inches in. I told him he followed that. And it's Carla Grubbers, it's the girls there's the secretary.
That's what I'm saying. Nobody. Until you get through it a few phases, a few times, you don't know what any of that stuff is. And
I did 4 weeks stormwater plan for a house in Hunter's Run. Went back and forth 4 times with John Grover just for a simple building permit. And it is not dealing with Kent County regulations, dealing with state of Maine regulations, dealing with stormwater. And John Grover's, every one of those reviewers has a different opinion about what stormwater regs need to be.
Yeah, I don't know. It's simple is better, man. I don't care what I say. Too much complications. Waste of time. Too much time. Too much everything.
And it is, I didn't realize that is more rural than it is in the residential zone. I honestly just never accounted for it. Most farmers, when we get to the meetings, they don't need to be involved.
Sam's this is your second time here, isn't it? You get a little bit better flavor for the meeting when you're here.
And yes, especially, I mean, the company, probably depends on those guys.
Yeah, you don't know when you're being heard, when it, yeah. It's true.
Cameras off, I'm playing with my kid.
Yep.
I'm on Facebook.
I'm turning it off. But I like it. I have two screens, and I can have this up on one screen, and I'm looking at the zoning ordinance, or like what you were talking about with the special exceptions, I'm scrolling through the ordinance, and I've got Merlin, and all that kind of stuff.
You're checking stuff out. I was just saying to the point you just brought up was really cool. That was good because I don't know what's on it. I don't know what
But then, I mean, the price of soybeans, I think I figured out, I mean, he's on.
way back. I just do it. You know, one time I was when I was younger, and maybe a few, not many times recently, but when I was younger, there were certain things I did in life that I just did. Like one of them was jumping out of an airplane. And I looked at that thing and I said, you know something? I'm gonna do it. And I did it. And I would have gone right back. Other things where we used to go and chase geese out to the frozen river back in the day. That's overgrown freeze free. You can't move. Same sort of stuff.
Nothing stuck. I ended up in the drain and the way. About that deep. I mean, just getting half mile back to the house, man. I thought
it gets you. You know, so I simplified for my life anymore. I'm gonna go back. The speed like I used to, I don't do a lot of things.
Wisdom.
I don't know. Compromise. It's got stuff
Have any grandchildren yet?
All right, we're going to get started. We'll be all set up for the watching this. Hey, Our next item is review of the concept of reducing setbacks for agricultural structures to 200 feet except near current housing developments, incorporated towns and villages.
I am.
Thank you, Paul, go ahead.
And we actually combined the two task force items. One was a request to review the concept of reducing setbacks for agricultural structures to 200 feet, and the other one was to review setbacks for buildings containing animals. We felt that the two were similar enough and they overlapped that we should just prepare one report. As you can see in the table in the staff report, the land use ordinance has multiple provisions for setbacks for property lines related to agricultural structures and uses, and the setbacks range from 100 to 600 feet. Many of them are related to animal housing or feeding structures or waste management. And I'm not going to go through all of the table. So the request was to review these setbacks. And sort of our thoughts on it is that the more intense uses, such as poultry houses, feedlots, or confinement dairies, have the strictest requirements, and that the 600-foot setback for those uses has been in place since at least 1989. Commercial stables have a 400-foot setback for structures related to housing and feeding horses and waste management, and many other uses have a 200-foot setback. While private stables, which is up to 4 horses or mules, have a 100-foot setback, and private stables is the use that is allowed in the zoning districts. And except for backyard chickens, the minimum setback in any district related to housing animals is 100 feet. So in some of the initial discussions of these items, the task force expressed a desire to simplify the regulations and to make the standards more consistent and less confusing. And several members opined that the current setbacks, at least for intense operations, should not change. So staff is recommending that setbacks for commercial poultry houses, feedlots, and confinement dairies remain at 600 feet. However, you could consider reduced setbacks for structures located adjacent to other farms. And in addition, staff recommends that waste management structures located on farms other than the one where the waste was generated be reduced to 150 feet, which is more consistent with the setback requirement that the Department of Agriculture has when somebody has manure placed onto their property for spreading. Then AFT recommends that for other animal husbandry related uses, that we consider developing base setbacks using animal units, which would kind of make it more objective, and that an animal unit is generally defined as 1,000 pounds of live animal weight, which is approximately 1 cow or 1 horse. And in Maryland, certain nutrient management regulations are triggered when you have 8 or more animal units. And so we suggest, as a starting point for discussion, a 50-foot setback. Or with a 50-foot setback, the property owner could have 0.1 animal units, which is equivalent to a single goat or sheep. And then as the number of animal units increases, the setback would increase up to the 600-foot maximum. And we just gave you some reference information on sort of animal unit equivalencies.
Thank you.
To the task force, do we have any comments or questions? Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, under the recommendations, one thing I would recommend, one is you're using the term feedlot. Well, that doesn't, today, animals are called animal feeding operations, AFOs, and then you would have AFO, which is a concentrated animal feeding operation. I would take out feedlot because the AFO covers all animals, all kinds of animals. So anyway, and that's just what I would just edit that. As far as changing it, I agree with keeping, well, this is not changing, I would agree with keeping the 600-foot setback for, the larger operations, as we have now have in our ordinance. But I'm not sure, once you made this table, I don't know how confusing this has become, because now you have a chart, someone can look at and see what I want to do and where I live, and you can see what the setbacks are. So it seems to have simplified, no one else has to go through the whole ordinance, section by section, to find out what the setbacks are, and have a chart here right in front of you. My other comment with regard to the waste management structures located on farms other than the one where the waste is generated be reduced to 150 feet. I don't know why you want to do that. It's still a waste management structure, and it is still going to hold manure. And now you're allowed, because we buy chicken litter, you're going to let us put our structure closer to the property line to hold the chicken litter. Yet our hog operation, because we generate that manure, has to be 600 feet back from the property line. I don't see a difference, because I realize you're using the 150 feet, but that was because that was for temporary use, but if you put in structure, it's no longer temporary. You can put the manure in there and maybe not clean it out every year. More than likely would, but you wouldn't have to, because you built the structure. So I don't agree with moving that structure closer just because it's not generated on that farm.
Anyone else on the task force? Here or online?
Question on clarification. So here's 600 feet. Are we sure that? Because it was only 4 or 5 years ago.
Sir, when we moved here, we had to put our lagoon 600 feet from the property line. And that's considered more.
Well, I'm asking because it was 5 years ago, I mean, it might be 6 or 7 now. Their text message changed, and changed to 600 feet, because Farm Bureau sent a letter wanting to leave it at 300 feet. I mean, I don't know.
To clarify that. Yes, 600 feet has been in place since 1989. The text amendment that you're referring to was when we did an amendment specific to waste management structures, because we were suddenly seeing people doing them as a best management practice, and when they'd come into it and they weren't actually the producer. So it wasn't somebody who had the chicken houses or dairy cows. We would refer back to what the standards were if you were being the producer of the waste and apply those. And I believe somebody sort of complained that was the standard we were using and said that it couldn't apply. And so we decided to do a text amendment to make it very clear that on waste management structures, whether it's on the farm where the waste is produced or it's on another property, is the 600 feet. It was to try to clarify, yes.
I don't, the state allows chicken litter, and I'll say chicken litter, could be something else, dump 125 foot off the road. But if you put a building in there, it's now 600 feet in King County. I certainly would think that, I would hope most people would agree that it's more protected building than it is just dumped on the ground. Particularly, it's better if the building has concrete floor around it, because anywhere you dump chicken litter, it seems you don't grow anything right there for at least the first year. If you move it, it'll recover, but it's gotta be seeping down into the soil. I just think 600 feet is, it takes so many acres. I think they figure out there it takes 83 acres, like, for one chicken house, if it's a 600 foot setback. And that gets irrigated, gets restrictive. We're not allowed capital buying land, buy the land. And, you know, when we're agriculture, it seems to me that we ought to support it, so restricted. And whether it's 200 feet or 300 feet, you know, I mean, we can discuss that, but 600 feet is just, I mean, so it's on orange, you can't do anything. If you get an 80 acre farm, you can't, that part of agriculture is not available. And I think that's wrong.
We have allowed, with special exception, allowed them money.
Right. Well, let me clarify. We'll come in and ask for variance. And in most cases, every case I know of, that's the commissioner, I've already read it except one. And if we're going to grant variances, why are we making it restricted?
I think we only grant them based on the hearing, what happened.
Well, right. Well,
I think the process allows the public to wait.
I know there was one person that, when they wanted to build, they have an animal operation, they want to build a floor structure, and they're told, well, you can't build it because you're actually variance goes to the board of appeals. And where did this come from? Why are we ever going to stop agriculture? And it's just one of those things that makes it. We have our agriculturally zoned areas that's sort of, that's allowed to do things that we're supposed to do in agriculture. And this, what we're asking, we're going to keep away from our developments. We're going to do that at 600 feet. So, someone else comes in and 10 years from now and wants to make a development or put their house in the ag zone. They should know, hey, this is going to be an animal operation or something else, a floor structure near your house. Who knows this? You build your house in the ag zone, that's what you did. You do that's agriculture. Don't complain about it there. I mean, so say, what
Excuse me.
with
Well, get it, not able to. Come on, that's Connors. Get it off your foot now. Get that summer.
I don't think it's true.
She's yelling at her dog.
Thank you, Tom. Maybe you can look at it.
This is kind of a question for Carla. So Carla, and I'm kind of going on so everybody understands. So if I have to build a house and setback 30 feet from the side yard, and I want to go 16 feet, just a little over 50%, I can come in and get an administrative variance. And don't have to go to the board of appeals, or have to go to planning commission or anything for administrative variance for the side yard setback. Does the same apply to chicken houses and agriculture things that are mentioned here?
Yes.
I guess what I'm asking is, if I buy a farm and I want to build a chicken house, 310 feet from the property line, do I need to go to planning commission and get a special, or board of appeals and get a special exception? Is that an administrative variance that you guys can have?
That is considered a setback variance, so yes, it can be done administratively, and we have done some ways construction that way.
So if, let's say I did that, it says that it's, well, this says, and I'm a little confused about this, but it says except near current house development. So neighbor, if I build a chicken house 310 feet from the property line, and the neighbor has a property that's residential, and they go to develop, does that mean that the new lots that they create would have to be 600 feet away from the chicken houses? Do you see what I mean? Am I making sense?
You say, do you have to take the new development, if you have somebody that's got a variance of 310 feet, and your next door is residential, does that real residential have to stretch out? Extend their setback 600 feet, including the 310?
Residential, that's what I would say, they are, that, if you want to build closer, that doesn't affect what's already there.
But you've got a double standard there, what he's saying is, you have a double standard. I don't agree. I agree with what he's trying to come up there. Because you're saying that you gotta have residential, you might be right, you use the word existing, but you shouldn't be able to have something 310 feet away from a development piece of ground anyway, in my mind. If you set back 600 feet, in ag district for housing animals, it's got to be 600 feet from any land that's zoned to be residential, I think. Like, not just residential, like one house, like lots.
Well, that's right, but my point was, I have rights to develop my property, my rules, what I'm using it for, it's a single family residence. If I choose to move it closer to my property line, and I got a poultry operation that's within its rights where everybody else built, that's on veganism.
Something that I have found over the years, and Kent County is probably the most prime example, where really the rules haven't changed in the last 20 years or so, but staff members have changed, on-site interpretation has changed. I've watched all the time where, I did a subdivision, on Working Neck Road. I had to stay 600 feet from a barn, and we could have done it. 3 or 4 years ago, we could have done an administrative variance. Or it wasn't even, we tried to push that issue and denied. So what I want to say is that as much as detail, whether it's setbacks of animal structures or whether it's under the residential zone, that we can beat on this to death, but when it comes to the planning director and the staff, their interpretation dictates more of what we're going to do here. In my opinion.
Can I ask for clarification, Buck? You're talking about somebody who wanted to do a subdivision and set the line closer than 600 feet. Okay. The distinction there is that that person couldn't ask for a variance because they were creating a hardship.
Okay.
So if yes, you still need a hardship. You still look for some sort of characteristic of the property that is generating the need for a reduced setback.
Okay, so if I had 60 acres, it couldn't meet the 600-foot setback. But if I had 400 acres, it could meet the 600-foot setback. I'm not going to get an administrative variance. That makes sense.
Right. Unless there's something really unique about the property for where you want to place.
Thank you both. Any more on the task force?
Quick clarifying question. When you say setback, we're referring to setback from the property line or setback from existing structure?
We are talking about the property line.
Property line. Okay,
Any comments from anyone streaming with us on the task force first? Thank you. Anyone on the streaming on public wish to comment on this issue? Do we have anyone in the audience who would like to comment? Please identify yourself.
David Bill. I agree with Ms. Pat on buying photos, which said 600 setback, 600 foot setback. And some of that reason is not a large acreage, even if you buy it, there's a chance that that person, because of the farm next to it, could have their house closer to the line than what you planned on. And their 600 foot where they moved their manure structure could be closer to the neighbor's house than it transported originally to their own house because the property is so large. Now, what Mr. Mason referred to as the one with the 150-foot setback, yes, if you're home door, no structure, it's temporary. It's going to come off the soil. If you make it permanent with the building, and with that case, the person had started the building without a permit. That was some of the issue, and he put it at the end of a runway, which was for ag use, and that was some of the other problems too. There's more to that case. But that one should be left alone too. If you're gonna make a permanent structure, you're allowed to hold more. It could be there for a year or two. Personally, I live 2.5 miles from Kendallville, and there is a permanent structure there. It's caught on fire 3 times. Wind blows to the north. Got every bit up. Now it's 3 miles away. When the wind shifted, I felt sorry for Kendallville because it covered the month. So there's a lot of thought to that. The question we do have, when you have the animal unit equivalencies, which gets back to future management plans, which that's in there, based on those things. What staff are we hiring that's going to drive around and check these every month? That's the question I have. I was at random this past month for nature management. He drives up there. My nature management plan better have in there, which was random, that's from the state, the number of animals I have there. But with anything else, they do multiply. People have a tendency not to tell the truth. So I'm wondering if, if you go that route, it just seems more complicated. Just making a couple of
Thank you, appreciate it. Anyone else? Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Came up here when I was working here, they had some people who would chicken houses. One gentleman that had every night, I asked Mr. Davis to put in this chicken house in the middle of a storm and what part to it.
I was planning on giving
I'll address it. If he chooses to testify, we'll let him answer that question. Go ahead. Please identify yourself.
I'm not putting you on the spot. You got through it.
Yeah, we weren't here, we were in the other, it was in 1995. Yes, it was a 600-foot setback, and we were there 2 nights till about 11 o'clock. I mean, the hearing room was full. Interestingly enough, if we were building a house in Delaware, it could have been 25 feet off of their backyard. So that was an interesting situation, but, and I could go into all that, but yeah, we're 600 feet. We tried to get a variance and we weren't successful. So we've got some odd shaped fields between our boundary line and the chicken houses. It's not very efficient, but that's what we had to do. And yes, we were 83 acres is what required to do those 6 chicken houses. And there ended up, part of it, to me, it's philosophical. We're trying to promote agriculture here. And kind of like Thomas said, if we want to make it difficult, it's already difficult enough to be in farming. But if we're going to make too many difficulties on particularly young farmers, and the average age is probably well beyond 56. It used to be 56, and it's going up because it's a difficult situation, highly capitalized. A lot of young people can't do that. So yeah, they've got to have a bigger parcel of ground to get some chicken houses in there, and that's really, we did chickens because it worked very well, and it has been a savior for us. It creates good cash flow from grain farm and evens out the income, and has paid a lot of mortgages for farmers on shore. And so, the 600 feet is I think it's excessive. I think when I look at the proposed table of animal weights and units, I don't see anything simple about that. Like I think what David said, that would just be a nightmare. Having to inventory your animals every month or year would be very, very difficult. But I realize
that if there are houses around, it could be an issue, but at the same time, they're managed differently than they used to be. I don't feel like our houses, probably biased, but I mean, they're just managed so much better than they used to be. As far, you open the houses where birds are caught, you're gonna smell chickens, but, and if you clean out the house, you're gonna smell. But those are brief moments in the year that oftentimes don't, I mean, we don't really do a full clean out, but 5 or 6 years apart, so that doesn't happen that often. And, I would be more in favor of seeing a reduction in that setback where the farm is surrounded by farmland. I mean, in this county, it's nearly impossible to turn farmland into development as it is. I mean, certainly if you want the opinion of your neighbors, some may not like it, the way it's going to be, some might not mind. But if it's farmland, it's very unlikely it's going to be developed. I think it allows efficiency down in that situation. More pertinent here maybe is, at least to me, is manure storage structure. I am more in favor of the 200-foot setback for that. When you look at the whole picture, that building is, the manure under that building is not going to be rained on. The chance of it contaminating anything going across the ditch and down into the soil is next to zero. And it's going to be protected from wind. It's not going to be blown over neighbors when it's broken open in the spring and hauled out of that, but no different than anything else. It's a difficult situation. We would like to have some buildings like that, but so much of our ground is leased. And it's very unlikely to have many of these buildings built because landlords aren't going to want a structure like that on a farm. But it is, to me, a preferred way to store manure because we do a lot of outdoor stockpiling. And we know what it's like. It does work well, it crusts well, and you pick it up properly, and we'll continue to do it. It's been approved by University of Maryland, Delaware as a good practice. But still, it's outside. It's more of a nuisance to neighbors than if it's in a barn. And again, like our chicken houses, you can put it in a more efficiently accessed area of your field rather than having to create a lane back 3 times as long with a yard around it. It would be much better, much easier for a farmer. And it could be a young farmer that really needs that break. So anyway, I won't fight tooth and nail about the 600 feet for, anymore with appropriate operations go into large. They certainly could fall in the category of intense operation. But if you're in the middle of farmland, what's the difference if the neighbors are in agreement? I think cooperation in that situation would be good. But I would like to see reduce requirement for setbacks for manure storage.
Thank you. Great. Any more comments from the public? Come forward.
I'm trying to get a little bit difficult to follow along a little bit about what we're talking about in terms of setbacks for if we're just looking at perhaps moving manure structures, or if we're looking at moving everything, the CAFOs, the FO, the feedlots, what is it, Pat? Poultry houses. But in terms of the management of manure, the state actually has a 200-foot requirement from anyone's house. They do not, at least in the regulations that are online, have anything in terms, this is for temporary, but a temporary use is a lot different than a permanent use. And I don't see the difference between whether it's the produce the waste or it's being brought on. If you're going to put it in a permanent structure, you do have the possibility, because the state doesn't require it, to continue to leave that on the property for as long as you want. You're not, unless the county is gonna have a requirement that within a temporary structure that is within 200 feet of a house, which is basically what the state says, that they're gonna have to remove it, and it can only be, even though it's a permanent structure, it can only temporarily house manure. I guess you could do it that way. You could say, you can do it, but you can't leave the manure in there, but then planning and zoning is gonna have to go around and you know, look at that in terms of it. I do not, living on a farm that's organic, that gets a lot of chicken manure, I can tell you that my husband gets an earful when he puts it closer to the house than is necessary. There's not only the odor and the, especially at all times, whenever it's there, but the fly production in our house goes up dramatically. And that would be true not just for my house, but for neighbors who had to have it closer to their house than 150 feet. So I think that the 600 foot setbacks is good neighbor policy. I think it's good neighbor policy for the people that live out in the community. I know we have a right to farm, but we don't have to be jerks about it. Thanks.
Anyone else in the public or online like to speak? Back up here, any comments? Hold on, go ahead. Yeah. Please state your name.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Devlin. I just had a question, and I don't know that I've ever noticed this before in zoning, but it says on greenhouses that they're permitted in AZD with 0 setbacks. And I was just wondering why they can be put at 0. I believe there's some in Countyville that are that close to a property line. I can only imagine as a neighboring farmer that's difficult when you're applying pesticides, that you have no room to get to the edge of your field before you're touching the greenhouse. So I'm just asking a question.
Jennifer, it's not 0, it's 25 feet. It's just.
Oh, it said without here in the chart.
It did, and I guess I was trying to imply that in the other districts that are listed, it's a 200 foot setback, whereas in AZD, the use itself doesn't have a specified setback. It's just an agricultural structure, which is 25 feet.
Okay, I was reading this as 0.
I can see that. I apologize.
And even at 25, that's pretty, I mean, given the difficulty with spray and drip, it seems maybe that needs to be revisited. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from anyone here on? If not, any general discussion items? First, does the staff have anything like to say? Related to our efforts here. I think before we leave the topic that we're on, I don't feel like there's been enough feedback to really determine what the task force's feelings are, with the exception of waste management structure and poultry houses and AFOs and CFOs. I think we heard clearly on that, but the idea of a sliding scale so that people might be able to have a single goat on their property and those kinds of things. I don't know if anyone wants to talk to that.
I'll offer a little more information. We, as you can imagine, get requests, probably once a month. I said somebody who is like, I'm looking at purchasing 5 or 6 acres. Can I have, goats on it? Can I have sheep? You get to 10 or 15, they might want some cows. And so there are a couple of districts that do have raising livestock and fowl as a special exception. but that's only in the rural character and rural residential district. So in the other districts, if somebody wants to have livestock, then we tell them they've got to have at least 20 acres so that they meet that definition of a farm. And probably 10 years or so ago, the Planning Commission looked at doing a text amendment to address sort of these smaller farmettes, and didn't come to any conclusion. And so this was a thought as a way to start addressing that. We can certainly take it as a separate topic. If you want additional discussion on it, I'm not sure how to fit that into the schedule, but we certainly could try. I think it is something that we do need to address, though, because it is a question that we get continuously, and I've had more than one person tell me, well, if I can't have my goats or my sheep, I'm going to go buy property in another county. It's kind of like you say you're a farming county and you're telling me that I've got 5 acres in the agricultural zoning district and I can't have livestock.
So that feedback like that is good to know. And when it comes to setbacks, a lot of it, especially to me, sounds very arbitrary. And this is probably just the Chestertown resident who talking, but I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in town. So when we talk about feedlots and AMOs and all of these setbacks, it's relatively contextless for me. So being able to compare whatever the current regulation is with proposed and not just testimony from the audience or submitted testimony, but just feedback that you've gotten over time relative to these would be really helpful, because I'm gonna be honest, 200 feet setback, 300 feet setback, I mean, it's making my head spin. It sounds the same, right? But you know, when you're able to pair it with stories and narratives like that, it kind of helps me dive in a little bit deeper when it comes to something that sounds just very arbitrary.
And I'm going to add, I happened to look down as you were speaking, and I had another thought that I wanted to express. I think if you look at this table, you'll notice that private stables, which is up to 4 horses, is allowed in agricultural zoning district, resource conservation, rural character, rural residential, critical area residential, and community residential. If you have a minimum of 2 acres, and you need to have at least 1 acre pasture per horse. And I've always had a hard time when people question me saying, you tell me I can have a horse, but I can't have X, Y, or Z. And again, that's kind of what was driving this thought of some other way to allow other animals that aren't cats and dogs, without specifying exactly which kinds of animals we're talking about.
Thank you. Other comments?
I was looking at the chart, so the very same thing. You're allowed, and that's a permitted use. If you can allow horses on the 2 acres, I don't know why you just don't go ahead and include a goat or a sheep or whatever, and max, put a max number of how many can be on 2 acres. I mean, you have a minimum of 2 acres, so if you go so many for 2 acres, then you can have so many for 5 acres or 10 acres, like that, kind of a short. What I'm trying to say, but anyway, increase as your acreage is increasing. But because you already allow horses in those zones, and it seems very simple to me to just do another line and allow your sheep or your goat. I don't know if you want to get all farm animals, but I would be wary of that. You know, sometimes if you have 5 acres, and they have 4 acres, and they want to raise something.
Isn't that the point of the animal of unit equivalencies?
Yeah,
right?
yes, that's what, I think that's what she Arla was wanting to use that standard for. I don't think she was talking about
cases and the cases during your point one.
No,
I was worried we would include that in the private.
it was right. It was a way to not list out goats, sheep, llamas, alpacas, pot-bellied pigs. I mean, you name it, we got a request if I can have it on my property. And the way our ordinance is written now, because we've got a statement that sort of says if a use isn't listed, then it's prohibited. And so because we can look to other districts and we go, okay, raising in livestock and fowl, that's a special exception in rural character, and that same sort of thing isn't listed in, say, AZD, unless you're on a farm. That's kind of where we kind of have to say no, and people scratch their heads. If somebody's got a better idea, we'd love to hear it. Like I said, we have dealt with this question for 10 plus years. We only get it more frequently the more people kind of want to know where their food came from, or they want to locally raise whatever they're eating, or they just want to have more exotic pets. I really feel that in this update of the land use ordinance, it is something we need to address.
Yeah, I'm always thinking about how state rules overlap county rules and all that kind of stuff. And this is kind of a follow-up question. David brings a good point, and there was a nutrient management plan. At what point, if you have two horses in your backyard, do you need a nutrient management plan?
It's
8.
Let me check.
Okay. So, and you put it out one animal per 1 acre of pasture, like horse or donkey.
Right. So for example, I'll read from the ordinance. A private stable, the lot shall be 2 acres or more. Any structure for the keeping of animals shall be a minimum of 100 feet from any property line. There shall be no more than 1 horse per acre of land. Only available pasture acreage shall be used to compute the number of horses allowed on a parcel. And then finally, the operation is managed according to waste and nutrient management plans approved by the Natural Resources Conservation Service, University of Maryland Extension Service, and the King County Health Department. And then there's some information about the phosphorus index. So even for any of these kind of small private stables, we do require that they submit something as to how they are going to manage the waste generated. And so we continue to do the same thing, whether we specify on a list of types of animals or do some sort of animal unit.
Any comments from the audience? Back one.
Yeah, Jamie Williams, Economic Development. What I just heard is that if a use isn't listed, it's prohibited. And that just seems kind of backwards to me. I kind of think if a use, if a use isn't listed, it's prohibited. It seems backwards. Like I think we should be able to consider things that aren't listed. Because I feel that there are things, we're kind of dating the plan, because there could be uses that exist 5 years from now that we don't know about currently. So we're prohibiting them in the plan, and that kind of dates the zoning ordinance. So I just wanted to mention that.
Amy, I'll add a little clarification. There are a lot of uses where, or there might be a use in some districts where other such uses that are similar as determined by the planning director or planning commission, fall into the category. So there is flexibility to allow for changes in what people want or need.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead.
I think sometimes you get caught up in, we talk about horses. I believe horses, cows, whatever the hell's in the same thing. And I don't know, does horses make a difference in this more calves? I don't know. The other thing, if we look around King County, we have these everywhere. People with their backyards, you can see a shed, and they've got a cow in it, or cattle horse in it. And so I mean, it's sort of like, I've heard the thing on that ask, so just go do it. And if no one complains, it's fine. Now, someone complains, they're having to have a special person, and they have to go out and deal with it. But it seems like in most cases, people are okay with it. In our agricultural areas. Now, not in development, right next to development. And that's why we were putting in here, let's stay 600 feet away from our developments in our towns, our villages. And to Carla's comment, just in the last 3 weeks, I've had about 3 people tell me, I'm moving to Kent County because you're so restricted in your agriculture. You pride yourselves on being an agricultural county, but you can't do anything. And that's sad. That's very sad. I mean, we're more restricted than anyone. I don't know any of you took 13 open. Next time you go through 13, go to the Chesapeake City Bridge, and right before you get to that next intersection, right on the right, somebody who's just put horses in the woods there. There are 2 horses. There's no pasture. There's no nothing. But what I imagine there is these people don't have a lot of resources. They were able to buy this little piece of land, but their horses and maybe got it for their kids. I don't know what they have it for. But in Kent County, we don't have something like that. But what's it hurting? What is it really hurting? This lady, they moved to Kent County. They had to buy the house in Manans County because we're not going to put up with the restrictions you have here. You got to maybe come home one day and there's someone standing there saying, oh, you got a horse back there, you got a cow back there. I just think it's something we need to think about, that if we want to continue to pride ourselves in being an agricultural county, we have to be supportive of agriculture.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to comment on that. I guess in my world, all I see are people who want to live in Kent County for agriculture, begging to come here. They're not 5 acres, but my point is, and Billy can verify if he wants. We have 5 acres for sale, tractor product, it's the same here in Indiana, except some people question the school system. But other than that, the property values are here. We don't have people, I never get able to say that they're waiting because of our zoning.
Let me clarify that. If they want to deal with apples, we have people that, I had a man the other day that he has chickens and he's in 11 county. I said, why are you staying here with this $50,000 land? Because I'm not coming down there. I couldn't build my chicken houses.
I've got people coming down here regularly right now to look at farms, and they want to be here. That's my opinion. Dairy wants to move out, Lebanon County.
I don't know why they all been moved here.
I think they do. But anecdotally, I just see a difference.
Well, I'm just telling you what I'm being told by different people. And I'm sure there's some, it's always that way.
Thank you. Hey, we've been talking up here, the public still gets a chance at us. We're not? Good. Oh, wait a minute.
I'm just gonna make it fast. I think where some of the differences are, we're talking 4-H projects. You know, I don't think anybody has a problem with 1 or 2 in the back. But in a few years that we fool with hay and straw, or most of my life, we find out that most people that want the horse or the cow don't realize how much they eat and how much you have to clean up for them and take care of them. And the next thing, that animal suffers. And I think that's probably why some of the things are in place, because a lot of people have good intentions. I want 10, 12 chickens, and they forget they eat a lot. And then they make a lot of eggs. And then they don't know what to do with the chickens. I think it's disposal of animals too. There's not many places to do that anymore, and that's another expense. But I think as far as 4-H projects go, or somebody that has something that they want to take care of, I don't think anybody in this county has a problem with that.
I think in our zoning, there's an exception for it. So we're not questioning regulations, but it's still a person's choice whether they want to have, or it should be, whether they want to have an animal, or don't have an animal. And if we talk about care of them, probably your best care is in your intense, animal project for your people that have more, because it's a business for them, and they're gonna take care of them. There's certain things you do today that you don't have near flies, but here again, we are trying to make it a little bit difficult. And I just believe we have to be more friendly and not have as many restrictions that we've had in the past.
Thank you. Well, I think we've exhausted this for tonight. Appreciate we'll revisit these issues next meeting. Staff, any comments before we adjourn? Take a motion. Second. Thank you.